For 11 years as an economic officer in the American Diplomatic Corps, posted to Mexico, Germany, Taiwan, People's Republic of China. He has been managing director of the German-American Chamber of Commerce since 1991. Our second speaker tonight, Patrick Bray, coordinator of public relations at JETRO, born in San Francisco. He holds a BA at the University of Hawaii in General Education, a BS in Sacramento State University, Organizational Psychology, an MBA from San Francisco State University, in International Business, honorary degree, Institute for International Training in Japan. He has worked in banking, import-export of live goods, food, sports equipment, and construction materials to Asia, selling software in Asia and Japan. He currently has been working for 3 years for JETRO in San Francisco, helping American companies selling their product in Japan. A brief introduction of some of you know me already. I'm an ex-student from Weller, and I took the opportunity to come here about 2 years ago. An export opportunity brought me over there, and I had the opportunity to get involved with the management problem through an American companies that organize seminars for European company here in San Francisco. The agenda for tonight, what I propose to you is, at the first place, we're going to listen to our speaker for 15 minutes. Each of them going to speak for 15 minutes. And we'll let you the opportunity to ask them as many questions as you want. And we invite you at the end for a cocktail. The purpose of this conference tonight, Weller has an international business school. The students through the program have the opportunity to see different perspectives of management, of doing business in different countries. Some of them are going to Spain, some of them are going to Germany. Everybody is coming here in the United States, San Francisco. The purpose tonight is to get a perspective from a European experience and from an Asian experience. These two gentlemen have been working and living in different countries. Our first speaker, Lawrence Walker.
Thank you. I will attempt to speak a little more slowly than I usually do, since I know most people do not speak English as a first language. But if I get too fast, start making faces or waving, and I'll slow down. New directions in management. I'm going to take this from the German perspective, but in a way, new directions is a bit of a misnomer. Management is about people, and the subject of management, people, have not changed in millennia. Interestingly enough, too, although the German management systems, parts of them, are seen to be fairly progressive and modern, in fact, they are based in things which are often very reactionary and paternalistic, but have developed beyond that and worked. Bismarck brought in the social insurance mainly to make sure that the socialist didn't come to power, and some of the good things that the firms do for their employees come out of paternalistic management systems going back to feudalism. But it is a very successful society, and things have developed well. This is a way of getting people, I see management as a way of getting people to work for a common purpose in exchange for taking care of their needs. And in this context, I think we need to discuss, first of all, German society, as management in the context of German society. I'm going to talk about the social safety net, labor and management relations, and the general attitude of people toward work in general and worker training in particular. First, to the social safety net. Germany, post-war Germany has called itself a soziale Marktwirtschaft, a social market economy. They've very constantly taken a path, as they say, zwischen Marx und Markt, between Marx and the market, and trying to take some of the best aspects of both systems. The social safety net in Germany functions much better than in the United States. Our social safety net is maybe better developed than many of you know coming from Europe, but in fact our safety net tends to kick in and work when you are already poor. The advantage of the German social safety net is that it kicks in early enough to keep you from going into a free fall out of the middle class, and you still have enough chance to catch yourself and bring it out. The characteristics of it are generous unemployment and disability benefits, worker retraining programs for displaced workers, universal health insurance, centrally administered, many parts of it, universal pension system, generous vacation and sick leave, and all these benefits mandated by law. Indirectly, in a way, the German monetary policy has helped to stabilize some of the contradictions in society. This was a corollary, an unintended benefit. German monetary policy has been based on German experience with inflation. The country that has had the worst inflation in history, despite Argentina and Brazil, is Germany. It got to the point of having the Deutsche Mark being worth, the exchange rate in November of 1923 being 1 trillion Deutsche Mark to $1. And they pretty well had to abandon their currency again after World War II. So by keeping things, by avoiding inflation at all costs, Germany has managed to have and the social benefits, Germany has managed to have economic cycles that avoid both boom and bust. The economy never does really spectacularly well, but it's always doing well enough, and there's enough fiscal stimulus so that when it drags down at the bottom, that things tend to come back up. So it's sort of a moderating of the highs and the lows. In general, I think most people agree that the German worker gets a fairly fair deal. This frees people up to concentrate on their work, if they're so inclined, and many people are. And it takes much of the social overhead off of the small to medium-sized firms that, as you know from a small firm in the United States, it's very difficult to offer your firm some of the social benefits and health insurance. It also costs a lot, and a German worker will pay a very much larger percentage of both employer and employee pay a fairly large percentage of the wage in the social benefits. But much of this is compensated by higher productivity, which we'll come back to. On the labor management end, you have to bear with me for another German word, Mitbestimmung, the worker co-determination. As a system that's developed in the 1950s through the 70s, union representatives make up as much as 50% of the boards of management of some of the larger corporations. The unions, and therefore the worker, are represented in and participate in management decisions through the Works Council. This tends to work for cooperation between the workers in a firm and the management of the firm, which at the top, essentially they become part of the management of the firm, and often leads to responsible but difficult decisions taken at the company level, and even cases where the Works Council, consisting of workers and union representatives, takes decisions which are actually against what the union wants. And that's for the large firms, of course. For smaller firms, the so-called German Mittelstand, or small to medium-sized firms, these are often family-run and tend to be fairly close to the workers by virtue of their craft and their size, and the long tenure that people generally have with firms. Another aspect of an organizing principle of the German society and economy is a strong product orientation of German firms. U.S. firms tend to be much more related toward marketing. People say that products are sold in the United States, not bought. In Germany, things it's quite the opposite. Products tend to sell themselves based on their quality. And the idea is that if we make the best mouse, there's an expression you may be familiar with in American English, if we have the better mousetrap, the entire world will beat a path to our door. Well, in Germany, that's a leading principle. If we have the best mousetrap, or the best fire extinguisher, or the best hotel safe, or the best whatever, people will beat a path to the door of our factory, even if our factory happens to be located in Oberbockendorf or someplace that no one's ever heard of. And largely they do. They do come to seek those out. It's difficult, of course, from my perspective in the German-American Chamber of Commerce to bring German firms in and bring them around more to a marketing orientation than that, but they go on the quality of the products. There's a craftsman-like pride in specialized work, and a tendency to get the quality right first and worry about the costs later. This is German products actually fairly competitive. Firms can have their products known partly through the tremendously extensive trade fair network in Germany, where everybody really knows everybody else within a certain market segment, and has made their products suffer relatively little in exports, even as the Deutschmark has been revalued again and again. Worker training. Worker training is starts in Germany with a pretty much two-track educational system. This is some people will go on a university track, and others will go on more a practical vocational education track. This has actually been this has been loosened up over the years. When I first attended a German gymnasium, it was difficult for someone who'd started on one track at age 10 or 11 to switch around to the other one. It's now much easier than it was. But the training already begins from there, and people tend to go through a few years, what we'd call the first couple of years of high school on the vocational track, and go on into an apprenticeship system. So you don't have people just jobbing in Germany quite as much as you do in the United States and other countries. If you see someone who's a waiter, it may not be a teenager, or someone who's between jobs, or someone whose real profession is maybe to be an actor. It tends to be a person who knows the way around food service very well, who knows the profession well, and who has the entire menu memorized and can do the entire edition in their head. Same way with travel agent, with any type of profession, definable profession. This craftsmanship and pride in work often tends to be recognized by titles and a certain role in society. The titles, of course, can be a little bit extreme in Germany, and it's already recognized that anyone with any type of doctorate, the doctorate becomes legally part of his name. It has to be on all civil documents thereafter. But specialists are deferred to because of their knowledge, regardless of what their role or their place is in society. I think this is best illustrated by a couple of anecdotes. One of the members of my chamber has a friend who is a painter from Germany. He doesn't do landscapes or portraits or such. He paints houses, wood detail, related to construction. He's not just an ordinary painter, though. He can paint wood grain on a wall, make it look exactly like real wood. This is his life's work. He's an educated man in other ways, but this is what he does, and he's always employed, even when the building trade is down. A train conductor, another member who's been out of Germany for 40 years and has forgotten some of this, I think, was amazed that there was a man with a red sash and a uniform, and they asked him, "What do you do here?" And he said, "Well, I'm the one who says that the train can go." And traveling companions laughed and said, "Well, I can stand out there on the platform and tell the train to go too." He said, "No, you can't. You have to go to school, and you have to do this, and you have to get this particular level and that title, and you have a certain amount of responsibility, and just when the train is supposed to go, you tell the train to go." And he was quite serious about it, and it's the pride in the work, which you would not find so much in this country. Things can get to a little bit to extremes in Germany. For instance, in order to get a driver's license in Germany, you have to go through a very long, very expensive course, and be trained in all sorts of things, both paper and pencil tests, road tests, and actually go through so many hours of training in hands-on first aid. The worst case I've heard so far, non-work related, was from a Canadian who wanted to get a fishing license, which in this country you get by paying $5 at the bait and tackle store. He had to take an entire fish and wildlife test in German, which he fortunately could do because he spoke good German and had worked for the Canadian Fish and Wildlife Service. But then the problem really came when he went to take the test once a year, where he had to take a fishing pole and cast at 50 feet and hit a target. At that point, he could have passed that, but he had a rehearsal that day and couldn't make it, and so had to wait till next year. Anyway, Germany people do tend to do things 110%, but it does show in the quality of the work and the attitude to the work. Firm structure reflects some of this. People say firms in Germany tend to be bureaucratic. Actually, they tend to be sort of specialized at the individual level. You need often 2 signatures on letters. You even get this word called der Rechtsunterzeichnete, der Linksunterzeichnete, the one signing at the left, the one signing at the right, because these people cross specialization areas and and can only act in conjunction with one another. Meetings tend to get rather large at times. The common phrase is, "Darf ich jemanden dazuziehen?" I'm going to bring somebody else into this meeting because that particular thing goes into his specialization. But every action on the part of the firm is taken more collectively, fairly seriously, and sometimes it's better, in fact, to write to a company rather than a certain person at the top of the company, because the letter may wait for the person, but if you write to the firm, then it often gets into the hands of the right people eventually and gets answered quite competently. Management careers tend to go this way. It's not uncommon for a technically competent person with good presentation and people skills to be promoted into management. Very unlikely to happen in the United States. We go more on the officer enlisted man principle, where somebody with an MBA goes and does up to 3 months on the factory floor, but then goes into management and never sees the product again. Whereas theirs will often have layers of management that come directly off the factory floor, are very well acquainted with the product, and are respected by the workers as being one of the most technically competent in the line area. Okay, summing up the results. It results in great technical competence, reinforces all these things, reinforce the product orientation, sometimes to the detriment of marketing and some customer relations. It makes the products rather expensive, but of high quality. The whole system encourages a pride in work and in the product, and by extension in the firm for which one works. If the salesmanship and marketing is lacking, after-sales service is a byword for German products. There are huge networks that exist for it, sometimes larger in this country among German firms than the actual sales networks. There's a maxim that goes with it that when things go wrong in an American firm sends faxes, German firms send engineers. Generally for society too, the results are it's harder to fall through the cracks of society. Anybody who wants a role can arrive at some sort of role, maybe a low but certainly respected position in society. It makes for a trained and competent workforce, quality products, always in demand. People will pay for them when they want the best. And people tend to have the leisure and the income to have a fairly good private life while still putting forth the proper effort on the job. Some of these things, my colleague is going to talk about the Japanese model. Not all of the things in the Japanese model are entirely transferable to U.S. society. Some of the things I think Japanese would like to transfer out of their own society because it is there is coming to some social strains there. But there are a few things that we could emulate in the German model, particularly vocational training and apprenticeship, a fair deal and the social safety network, and a little more pride in all types of work and a closer business-government labor cooperation. Then we could also join the other two great economies of the developed world and compete more on quality, leaving the price advantage to wherever it might be available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Westmore, about it.
Well done.
Well, good evening. My name is Patrick Bray. I am the coordinator for public relations for JETRO in San Francisco. JETRO stands for the Japan External Trade Organization. It's a branch of the Japanese government. It was established in the late 50s to help Japan cure its chronic trade deficit. Now Japan has very few problems with its trade deficit, but has many problems with the deficits of other countries. So in the past 10 years, JETRO's job has been to help the Americans and the Europeans and those of other nations get their products into Japan. Looks like we have a young crowd here, fairly young tonight, but how many of you expect to sell products to Japan? If I can ask a question, how many of you expect to sell your products to Japan? Well, there's one of you. How many of you expect to work for a Japanese company? I got a couple. How many of you expect to be in severe competition with your Japanese Japanese businesses? A few more. Actually, if it was probably none of the three, it's best that you stay on an island because you're going to run into one of those three sooner or later. A little bit about Japan. Could go into any of these subjects for hours. Again, I'm a generalist and I'm an American. My job at JETRO is to be in between the Japanese and the Americans. So some things I say Japanese people disagree with, and some things I say an American has a different experience in Japan. That's the way it will be. But Japan is a small country with a very homogeneous society, but has an extremely dense population. It's a mountainous country, has very few natural resources. Because of the population and the size of the country, there's a deep respect for harmony. These people have to live with each other all their lives, and their neighbors very close to them. So they prefer a less confrontational approach than many of us out here in the Wild West with all the space we have around us. Also, they have a long history of being a rather closed society. They've fought openness at almost every turn. This is prevalent in almost everything they do in their society today. There's us and there's them. Even in business, there's our business, their business. There's our department, their department. And your relationship on Japanese is based on you're either one of them or one of us or one of them. And so you may have to face that. In my position, it took me almost 3 years to become almost someone they can trust. But again, they have to do this if they're going to be involved in the international markets. Like I said, the society before is extremely conformist. They like to do things in similar ways. There's an expression called the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Should you do something different, society comes and bats you back down to make sure that you're in line with everyone else. This is not to say there are differences. There are differences between Japanese, and those can be exploited, but they all have this pervasive type of group harmony based on some of these things, or at least expressed in some of these things. Currently, I'd like to talk a little bit about working in a Japanese office. It's considerably different than working in an American office. I've worked in Japanese offices, or American office in Japan, and a Japanese office here in America. And the first thing is you have to realize they maximize the overtime amount that you have to work and minimize your vacation time. There's no way around it. In Japan, for example, the vacations were almost considered disloyalties to the company if you took your vacation. You may be assigned a vacation, and now they're trying to force people to take them, but the people still don't want to show this kind of disloyalty to their company. Here in America, the main reason for overtime is when it's 5 o'clock in the evening here, it's about 9 o'clock in the morning there. So all the phone calls start coming in, and you end up in the office with things to do immediately until maybe 10 o'clock at night. Also, you may notice the structure of the office. Our office here in America and the office in Japan is an open office. At our office here, we only have one person that has a private office. That is the head of our office. Everyone else works in an open office. My boss sits directly behind me. His boss will sit behind him. My subordinates sit in front of me. So every time I pick up the phone call, my boss can hear. And my boss's boss can hear. And the boss of all of my bosses is sitting there in a side view, so he can watch the whole office and hear everything that everyone has to say. This is a real shock going to there from working here for American companies. We're in a small office. I've got my own. I can close the door. I can talk on the phone. In Japan, everyone's watching you all the time. It's a very different situation, and they've transplanted some of that here to America. There are very few privileges of rank. There are no set parking spaces for the directors, and most of the directors don't have their own private offices either. Some of the communicating style is extremely different. It's very difficult to get any of my bosses ever to say no. It gets me in trouble all the time. If an American doesn't hear no, he assumes yes. So every time an American will visit, your boss said this was okay, and I visit my boss, and he's like, he can't say no. You could look for common hints of no's in such things as you ask, do you think this is a good idea? And they'll say, well, maybe we should consider this. This is a definite no. There's no question to it, and you have to interpret it as such. Also, when they say yes, they have a Japanese word that says hai. That means yes. It really doesn't mean yes. They translate it as such, but it more means I hear you. So a common response to almost any sentence or question would be hai. To get someone's attention, hai doesn't mean yes. So if someone says, do you think this is a good idea? The Japanese boss answers hai. He just says, I hear you. And then the American goes off and, assumes that the boss said it was okay and finds out later. Yes is so commonly used. Should you ask even a simple question such as, would you like to go to an Italian restaurant tonight or a German restaurant? And the answer will almost inevitably be yes. And you ask which? Huh? Yeah. So there are these communication problems, and they're deeply rooted in the Japanese language without going into it, but you have to hear them here. Most of them will speak at least some English. And so the method of communication is usually English instead of French or Japanese or German. So you have to be aware of these things. There are other very common things that I run into with my boss all the time, such things as there's an expression called ishin denshin. It's a kind of mind reading. When my boss calls me over to his desk and says he'd like to fly to Japan next week, I am supposed to return to my desk, know the time he wants to leave, know which hotel he wants to stay at, know which business appointments he wants, and then be able to call his wife and tell her what to pack. This is expected. When I come back and ask questions, they shake their heads and go, oh, those Americans, they need so much coddling, so much help from us. No independence in their thought. They have to learn what we like to do. Ishin denshin is a kind of maybe mind reading. It's where you have developed such a strong relationship with your boss that when he asks a question or when he gives you a statement, you're supposed to know exactly what he's talking about, even if he only gives you partial information. You have to act on your own. This creates a lot of problems in the office. Another common thing, I come inside and I see the wife is throwing plates at him. They're having the argument of a lifetime. Maybe my appropriate response should be, I'm sorry to come to your house during cleaning time. I know it was such a good time for you to clean, and I'm sorry I was so rude by coming over at this time. And then I'll promptly exit. These things manifest themselves in all facets of the office. Decision-making in Japan is always by a group. Everyone in the office gets to know what everyone's decision is. If you're in the public relations department like I am, and there's another person in the technology department, if I don't tell him I'm going out to make a speech tonight, he feels he's been left out, he's very upset. At the same time, if I say I'm going out and giving a speech, when we do this in a Japanese office, he would ask me, do you need some kind of help? Because we're in this together as a group. They don't like surprises very much in Japan. They like to stick with a decision. It would take them hours, days, weeks, months to make a decision. But once they've made it, they don't change their minds. They continue with it. In the American companies I worked for, we may make a decision very fast. Should situations change, we change and do something else. I have a tendency to say in my job that the American manager makes a decision very fast and makes a poor one, and the Japanese manager never makes a decision at all. So it comes down, I have to make the decision. Another aspect of Japanese company that's very important is meetings. Meetings, 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 meetings. The personal relationships with you are the most important. Not be efficient in maximizing the efficiency of your time in the office. Any meeting is always an acceptable thing. I spend most of my days in meetings and most of my nights doing my work. A few notes quickly on selling in Japan, just to change the subject because I wanted to cover too many things in too short a time. Should you sell in Japan, the most important thing is to study the market. Because study the market, know what's going on there. What do you have in your product that the Japanese don't have in their country or what they're selling already? Maybe you have a technology, maybe you have a brand name, maybe you have an image. An example of image, the French the French are very famous for their colognes, their perfumes, much of their fashion. The technology on this is usually not too high. The Japanese companies can keep up with the technology, but they certainly can't produce a French cologne. Therefore, the French have an advantage in this area. Be creative in your strategies. For example, we found out that next year, according to surveys, they expect over a 200% increase in horse riding in Japan. There aren't many horses in Japan, so there's not going to be many people selling equipment for this horse market, but everyone wants to participate. So what can you sell them? Well, why don't you sell them riding